Hey guys, Edre here, and today I'm going to be doing a brand new album review, and I'm going to be reviewing the new and debut album from rapper Megan Thee Stallion, the highly anticipated Good News. Where do I begin? Well, a bit of background like I do with all my reviews. Megan Thee Stallion has really blown up this year with a string of hot singles and features as well. And while I myself have been a little indifferent on her stuff, I also don't really think she's the best in the game, as some people are making her out to be, but I also have yet to be extremely disappointed by her. And the one thing I have picked up on from her singles is that she is a talented artist. She is a talented rapper. She has a pretty good flow on a lot of her tracks that I've heard her on up to this point. And for the most part, I've been left relatively satisfied. I've had very little negative to say about her up to this point. So going into this album, this is the perfect segue. The first thing that stuck out to me was the extremely low quality beats on this album. Before I even get into her delivery, before I even get into the lyrics or anything like that, this album is produced so poorly across the board, especially compared to the singles she dropped before this album in promotion of the album that got slapped on the end. You know, Girls in the Hood, for example, is a well-produced song. It's good enough. It's fine. And then you compare it to the rest of this album, which is honestly produced like total crap. I mean, I try not to get that heated in my reviews, but I was honestly expecting this to be produced a lot better than it was. And to be fair, I have reviewed albums that aren't produced that well, that are still good. You know, a lot of punk stuff, a lot of stuff like that. But this style of music, especially considering what she built up the expectations to be, I went into this expecting some of the best production in the game, especially considering the singles up to this point were actually pretty well produced. So that was the first thing that stuck out to me. Like, this album opens up with the song Shots Fired, which has one of the most underwhelming, monotonous beats you could have possibly picked to open an album with. I don't get why anybody in their right mind would ever pick a song with such a predictable and monotonous beat with nothing unique to it to open an album with. It really turned me off immediately. It's also worth noting that many of the songs on this album are so short that they end before they get anywhere. The DaBaby song, for example. DaBaby dominates almost the entire song, and by the time you get to Megan Thee Stallion, the song's over. And it just sucks because I know that she is talented. I don't know why my dogs are barking, but I know she's a talented rapper. I know she is not like just some random person doing this for the sake of doing this. And I wonder if you could see my dog. I wonder. But it just left me shocked. And things get worse regarding the production. The song Sugar Baby sounds like a cheap video game soundtrack from the 90s with these horrible trance synths throughout them. I don't know who thought that was a good idea. And perhaps the worst song on this entire project in a both production sense and a lyrical sense is the song Don't Rock Me to Sleep. It's a horrible, cheesy pop dance track that is just so monotonous, and it's not the only time they get into it. Occasionally, however, I will say the production does surprise me every now and then on a song like Outside, which does have a pretty cool chord progression, which I thought was a little bit of a nice addition. That's enough on the production. Let's actually get into the actual delivery here. Megan does have a pretty strong delivery on this album. However, on many of the tracks, she underplays her talent so much for what feels like just a petty excuse to just get a pop hit. And I know she could do so much better since the singles she put out are actually much better. The songs on this album, the way she delivers them is almost the same on every single song. Almost the same delivery and flow on almost every single song, to the point where it is just so obnoxious and disappointing, because we've heard her do different deliveries and we've heard her do them well. It's not like this is like the first time in a million years that we've ever heard her. Like, I don't know. I don't get it. I genuinely don't get it. Up to this point, I haven't had any problems with her delivery, and yet for some reason on this album, so many of the songs blend together with roughly the same style and tone of delivery on every song. And it's just very... It feels like she just watered down her sound for the most mainstream appeal possible, and it seems to be working. Is it even worth talking about the lyrics on this album? Is it? God damn it! The fire detector's going off, but not because of the fire, but because the battery's low. There's such typical shallow subject matter throughout this album that it's just the line "put a cast on the dick" from the song "Do It on the Tip," which might be one of the worst songs on this album. I don't know what's worse, the lyrics, the production, or the delivery. Needless to say, the amount of dick size comments and just comments about that kind of shit is just present throughout this entire album with little substance. Little does she actually dial it to a more deep tone. Very rarely do I ever see her do that. And perhaps the worst lyrics on this entire album are the amateur lyrics on the song Don't Rock Me to Sleep, which I mentioned earlier. It's the horrible dance pop number that has some of the most amateur pop lyrics I've heard all year, let alone all decade. I don't know what went on, but and don't even get me started on the flow on the chorus. If you wanna go na 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 na, it's the most monotonous chorus I've ever heard this year, and the lyrics do not help it. I will say, once again, the song Outside does seem to shock me, as it was one of the few songs that actually seemed to be a bit more well-executed, with lyrics where she actually talks pretty good about introspective lyrics about how people just want her to be sexy, they just want her to do the bare minimum, and how she wants to express herself. And while those lyrics are good, and I like this song much more than many of the other songs, especially Don't Rock Me to Sleep, if you want to be expressing yourself, then why do you do everything you're complaining about on this song? You're literally feeding into every single stereotype imaginable on this album, and then you complain about it on a song like Outside. I don't get it. You have the talent. Why don't you use it? I genuinely don't get it. It's beyond me. The final thing I'm probably going to talk about here on this album is the features. It's not loaded with... I mean, it does have a lot of features. But I'm only going to talk about a few of the standouts to me. DaBaby just dominated the track, Crybaby, to the point where Megan sounds like a feature on her own song. Lil Durk almost completely ruins the vibe on the song Movie. I don't know why he was even on there. Completely killed the vibe. And perhaps the only feature that I thought was actually kind of promising was Young Thug. This is a common theme. I really do like Young Thug. But Young Thug is definitely the strongest feature on this album, singing over or rapping over a very Yeezus-style beat, very industrial song. I actually didn't have too many problems with the closing track, but that's about all I have to say. This does sound like it's building up to be my lowest scored review, and it probably won't be. But I will say that it's probably one of my most disappointing albums this year, especially considering the amount of hype I've seen this album get versus the actual delivery itself. It actually is one of the most disappointing albums I've heard all year. I hope that she really does do better. I hope that she does realize the flaws on this album in the fact that she does not play to any of her strengths here. I'm feeling light 2 on this album. Anybody that doesn't know my reviews knows anything should know anything below a 5 is negative, anything above a 5 is positive. So a light 2 is a negative review. A very negative review. And I think it's justified because I was expecting something much better. I was expecting something much more grandiose, something much more impressive, especially considering I have yet, like up to this point, I've liked her delivery, I've liked her flow, I've liked her style. I don't know where she went wrong. And the final point before I end this video, the critics loved it. The critics loved this album. Because at the end of the day, she made the album they wanted, but not the album she is capable of making. That is it for now. Megan the Stallion, or Megan the Stallion. Good news. I mean, unfortunate, 2 out of 10.